It's a wonderful topic we have today. And guys, we're going to try and tackle it from so many angles, making sure that we covering everything that everyone will be able to go home and really acquainted and kind of learn a thing or two and be able to talk about the topic without being argumentative or without it being so overbearing or without it really scaring anyone to say something about it or to share about it. I think that's the whole purpose when we take a very, I call it stomaching crunching topics like this. And throughout this whole month, we're going to definitely be diving into it. It needs to be talked about. We need to gather as a people of Africa from different, born in different parts of the hemisphere or of the globe. We need to get together and talk about it. I think it's about time. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started as usual. And we will definitely dive into all that we need to do today. Okay, let's take ourselves, the whole program to the heavenly throne. Father, thank you so very much for this day. Thank you for the opportunity that every February of the year, we are celebrating Black History Month. We have come a long way. It has not been easy. And one of those really hard time in the beginning is what we want to share today. It's still very troublesome at heart to us, but most importantly, the goal is to remove the division, the disunity that is causing among us as your people of Africa. And we really thank you so much, Father. I pray that everything we share today, everything we're going to talk about comes spiritually out from you, oh God. Take over. Let the Spirit speak, not me. Let thy will be done, oh Lord Almighty. May my will be in alignment with you, oh God. Thank you so much in Jesus' powerful name. Amen. So let's dive in, and I'm going to share with you all my own interpretation or my own understanding, not even my own interpretation, but what I know that actually existed till I left Africa in the 70s and 80s and still exists today. So let me read 1 Peter 2:18 as an aspect of how slavery is shared in the Bible for us. This 1 Peter 2:18 says, "Slaves, in reverence to fear of God, submit yourself to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh." And why do I want to share this? I want to share this because, again, that's how I believe that also helped our ancestors to think, because these are African ancestors that were under God's reverence. They believe so much in God, and they raise their children that way. So, but I want to, before I go and dive in deeper in it, I want to hear from you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I know you gotta have some question or at least comment.
Yeah. So when I saw the email for today's discussion, I said I definitely wanted to join because it's a hot topic.
It's a hot topic for sure.
A hot topic, and it's causing a lot of division between Africans,
all of us, yes,
and Black Americans. So I was really here to learn, different perspectives, but also provide my own perspective on things. There's this movie that recently came out called The Woman King. I don't know if you got to see it, but it's an exceptional movie. Viola Davis played the lead, and it just talks about how the Khmer, I believe, I forgot the exact name of the tribe of women soldiers who at the time were defending the king, and this king had a direct relationship with the Portuguese who would come and he would sell slaves to them, and then in return we would get different goods and stuff. And so the movie was just around the movie was just really around them trying to transition away from the slave trade and actually trade palm oil instead. So it was a very interesting movie. Whenever I hear, because I'm a first generation Nigerian American, whenever I hear Black Americans talk about how we sold them, it kind of hurts me to think of that, just because I feel like we are one, essentially, but there's so much division. There's so much division there. So I mean, historically, there are accounts that some African nations, particularly in the east of Nigeria, did like engage in the slave trade. But I don't know to what degree or anything like that. So I'm curious to learn more about that as well.
I see. Okay. Well, to me, just like I was saying before you joined us, and by the way, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your being here. But to me, I think all of that, and it all depends who's giving the account. The first account is totally different from what we kind of like, what is watered down to today, which is the frustration that we are suffering today. I personally don't think.
Be allowed to also chime in.
Sure, please.
Yeah, because
go ahead.
You've already laid the foundation, and it will also be good to hear from others.
Yes,
what they know. I've been, I was working in the African Union that transitioned all the African countries from colonialism to independence. And then, from the OAU, Organization of African Unity, that transitioned into the African Union, just like the European Union and so on. So I can say that apart from what I learned in school, I've been blessed, I would say, by God's grace, to be in I've been to most African countries, and I have a wealth of knowledge about what happened in each of their cases that have led to the situation that they are in right now. Okay, in terms of background. So since we are zeroing in on the issue of slavery, I want to tell you that there are different types of slavery routes all over the world. But since we are talking about African, we are talking about this transatlantic, but also there was slavery to the Arab countries also.
Yes.
They're from Africa. And a place like Zanzibar, which is the island country, one of my favorite places to go, the island part of the Tanzanian country, as a country, was a slave post for slaves from Africa to be taken to the Arab countries. Most people don't talk about that, okay? But since we are talking about the one on this side of the ocean, I would like to say a few things. You cannot have a one paintbrush to talk about slavery, even when we are talking about transatlantic. No, not one paintbrush. We have to look at what obtains inside the African continent by itself. Because before the white people or people from outside came to get us involved in slave trade, there was slavery going on within the continent itself. Like if you go to, since our sister there talked about Igbo land and so on, that's how the origin of the Osu came. These were people when there were intertribal wars, and they captured people from maybe the northern part of Nigeria, the present day Nigeria, and they bring them to the Igbo land, and they segregate them to say that these are slaves. And that is a tradition that is still on till today. Those who consider themselves free-born Igbos will not want to marry those that they called the Osu, that originated from from slave trade and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Although you can't see the difference between all of them. All over Africa, we have things similar to that. Okay, so I'm just citing that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always had intertribal wars. We've always had people shifting from one place to the other because of one war or the other. We've had various wars, even if we want to limit ourselves to West Africa, that have shaped the landscape, right from the time of the Mansa Musa, in the Sahel region, the Kingdom of Mali, the Yoruba Empire, the Oyo Empire, the Benin Empire, and things like that. So there's always been, wherever you have human beings, you have people wanting to dominate the other. I've just come back from Israel, and when we went on one tour, and they were telling us about a particular place where they said the Armageddon fight or something fight took place. And the number of various tribes that came to conquer, and another one will come and conquer, and so on. So it's always like that. You have one group of people, maybe for economic reason, or maybe because of population expansion. And that is why even up to today, people are still on the move. They are moving, they want to move from one place to the other because they want something better. Mm-hmm. So I just think that we just have to lay that foundation to say that before people came to come and take us as slaves to wherever, whether it's to the Arab world or to the transatlantic that went to the Southern American and all this Caribbean and also America itself, or later to Britain and all that, that we had that problem with us already.
Okay.
So as we go on, maybe I will say something else.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so very much. I do appreciate that. I want to address the main aspect, and I'm glad that you brought that out. I still stand to say that in defense to our ancestors, they did not start the slavery. And the part that you are talking about, which is Yosu, you have to understand why the Igbos started going against it. Again, particularly, and it's really all over Africa, but the Igbos, which majority of them are also the indigenous Igbos, are also in Cameroon, okay, after the division. So, but I want everybody to understand that the human beings started in the Igbo land, in this area and the kingdom where I'm pinpointing on, okay? And that these are people of God. They reverence God so much. Now, if you remember, I said before, the slavery it's really some, you call like episodes of time that it took place. And as each time there's something that actually increases or continue to continue to expand more than what it was before. But specifically for the Osus, they weren't being sold as slaves. The main issue with the Osu is that these were people sacrificed to the other gods other than, because we don't believe in God other than one human God, the true living God. That's the main thing, the Igbos. And so the Osus were those sacrificed to those non-living God. And for an Igbo to intermarry or to even get in any association whatsoever with someone who has been sacrificed to another God, it's an abomination. And so that's how it came to be that we were all against the Osu. The Igbo in particularly, and especially, in fact, up to today, we have those aspects of Igbos who are now in the side of Cameroon, still living like the ways it's described in the Bible to verbatim. And I'm hoping I will do a show on that one day. Okay, so the Osus were in particularly chased away, and in many cases, as the years start to come, all of them were to be rid of until religion came, Christianity, I should say, particularly came into existence. Okay, so Osu was not supposed to intermarry or even have any contact or connection. It's the same with you maize of something of that nature. I think it's either Osu or Ume, but these were people sacrificed to a god and to an Igbo who's the typical Jew, to touch anything that is unclean, as far as is already sacrificed to a man-made god or a God that is not of a living God, because we believe that our God exists and he lives in heaven. And so to be intermarry up to today, before you marry an Igbo person, they're going to ask you, are you sure that they're not Osu? So it is, yes, it brings division among the people, but there is a reason why they do that. They never went out to say, okay, I'm going to sell the Osu. No. The Osu is treated just like any Igbo that was back then found to be a thief. So that means you're going against our God. By dishonoring the God, when you don't be obedient to the commandment, it is seen as a dishonor to God. And they will do anything possible. Just like it was existing before. If you sin, you are, thrown, everybody gathers and throw a stone at you. So, but over the years, things are begin to start being lesser and lesser. The Osus, after the slavery started, were the ones that were kidnapped mostly, or were given, or anyone, like I said before, who actually stole. Anytime you're seen as someone, this is my own personal witness, if I may say it that way. I wasn't grown at that time, but as the Igbos are known to hand down stories. A grandfather, I've heard it from him. Grandmother, I heard it from, But the Igbos are known so tightly, so staunch about pleasing their true living God. They will be the first to tell you, I'd rather die than to worship that idol. Okay, the true Igbos from this indigenous area where I truly believe human beings started from. Because up to today, as is described in the Bible, in the Genesis, it is how they live today. Okay, so it is a different thing for the Osu. Now, when slavery started, like I said before, everybody probably got into it and said, okay, well, hey, I can make money on selling this person. After all, they did not respect God, or they're disobeying their father and mother, or they stole, or they raped. If you will rape a person, that's right there called for stoning. You're supposed to be killed. So if an alternative came from killing you to selling you to go serve, and maybe you can then, after being, it will be equate to going to prison today. After you go serve this slavery master, maybe perhaps when you come back, you will then change and never rape somebody, or never steal again, or never go worship idol, all of those things. That's how they saw it. But I'm here to tell you, as my grandfather told us, and in his section, none of the African ancestors that I hear from and their grandkids, we've gone to the part where it was called a meeting in the villages, and we're taking it through everywhere. They didn't know their children would never come back, no matter how bad that person was. In fact, the parents of the ones whose children were the ones that were stealing or raping people or doing sinning against the God and against man, they were happy to see slavery came, which is what we call it today. They didn't know it was slavery. They were happy for such service to come. Oh, now instead of my child being stoned, I can then let him go and travel. Maybe these people can help him be a better child. That's how it seemed. Okay. So, but all in all, everything that Africans do was to please their God. These are people of God, like tremendously heavy, staunch worshipers of God, which was how they were gotten in terms of colonization. They came through by using them to believe that, change their Christianity, bring Christianity to them. So when you talk about anything of God, hey, you pleasing the same God, but they didn't know it's not the same God. But why I want this to be happening and conversations like this to be taking place is that our younger generations needs to know the history. They need to know what's going on, and then we'll be able to live together and respect one another, especially those of us who are here in America or Canada or UK. We need to be able to get along. Bottom line, you are Black. I don't care if you live in Brazil or United Kingdom or Canada or anywhere in the hemisphere. You are going to be treated the same way. We are treated the same. You are Black, you're Black. And I don't care, as my wonderful, beautiful sister, Halle Berry said, if you have, 0.0.1, you're still Black. You're going to be considered Black. So why all this fuss is my key. And in knowing the truth, in knowing the real deal, it'll help for us to stop hashing at each other, because this is intentional. The division among us is also intentional, that we continue to be divided. So it's up to us to train and re-educate ourselves. Like they said, our forefathers in America used to say the re-education of Negro, but I changed it, the re-education of all Africans. It has to take place.
I believe that history is very, very important, because if you don't know where you are coming from, you cannot know where you are going to.
Exactly.
But at the same time, we have to ensure that our history is not used against us to divide us further. Because whether you are a Black person in Africa or you are a Black person anywhere in the world, even I was shocked when I went to India and I saw that the darker the skin there, the more you are discriminated against. If you go to Greece and you go to maybe Cyprus and all those places where there are also Black people, they are discriminated against everywhere on this planet. I don't know about other planets. If you are dark-skinned, you are discriminated against automatically.
Yes.
So I think we should look at what unites us and come together, because we carry something that is very important as Black people. It is the only people that once you crossbreed with another race, automatically you become Black.
Exactly.
It came about as a negative thing, but I mean maybe, but I think it's the most beautiful thing.
I do.
Yes, I do, and a lot of us know now.
Yes, so I think we all face similar challenges, and when people come, because the way people can divide a household is either through race or through religion.
Yes.
And race, you don't have control over.
Yes.
Religion, you don't even have control over, because you can be born into it. If you are born into a religion where it's Hinduism, you will say that is the only way to reach God. You will slam your head on the ground and so on. And it is like that until when maybe God ministers himself to you to say that no, this is what I want you to be. So we should not divide ourselves along any line, because we all face similar challenges, whether we like it or not. Yes. So when you are now talking about coming from Africa, or coming from the Caribbeans, or coming from anywhere, we are all facing similar challenges. So we need to put this away and not let people that have things to benefit from the division, because it's when there is, even the Bible says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So we all have to come together. It doesn't matter whether we come here by boat or we come here by plane, no matter how we got here or we get anywhere, we have to work together. And I can tell you, I know a particular country, which I'm very familiar with. Even there is discrimination in the country, because the darker you are, in fact, they have a saying that a Black person can never be beautiful. And when you look at these people that are talking, they are darker than me. But because they have been intermarried with other races, and they have a large population of fair-skinned people, and they are not even as in terms of population, not as many as the general Black in the country. But because those who have been ruling have been light-skinned, and they have, tried to use that to have a creme de la creme amongst them to benefit and so on. Because people are always trying to divide people up so that they can exploit them. So I'm trying to tell you that discrimination against even people that are Black, they even discriminate against people that are
against each other, right?
Yes, are darker skinned than them for one. People are always trying to exploit what separates us than what unites us.
What unites us, exactly.
Exactly, for their own benefit. But they are being short-sighted, because what goes around comes around. If it doesn't come around in your generation, it will come in another generation or the generation after. So I think I think that is the way to go. Thank you.
That's very, very important, because that's the only way, which is why I put it in my topic. I said, how do we heal to maintain that covenant, focusing on what unites us and rather than the dissimilarity that we don't have. And so it's very important in order for us to gain back the covenant. So many people don't realize the Black people have that covenant. And you mentioned one of them, and the main key covenant is the melatonin. That's one thing nobody can ever take away from us. Okay. The second one, our wonderful leader, MLKK, whom we celebrated his birthday recently, mentioning is that, you can never take away my soul, what I have in here, So talking, and that's what we're going to hint on week 4, linking it to how that, because again, think of Africans as the people of God. These are people that literally lay themselves down to getting to know who this spirit is. So you can never take away the spirit in here, as I link it to the source, as the New World will call it. If I link to the spirit, you can never take it away. Okay, so how do we achieve that is what we're going to really talk more in depth in the week 4. But I'm so glad you hinted that, because that's the key. We need to start focusing on unity rather than focusing on what separates us. Very, very good.
I agree. If I can interject and say one thing, just since we're talking about the divisive instruments that are, put in place to kind of divide us all, I think, I guess once we get to talking about how we heal, like in part 4, we're going to have to more so analyze how we're contributing to that division, our stereotypes that we have against each other. There's a group called FBA, Fundamentally Black American, and they do not want any association with Africa. They don't want, they say that they're not Africans. They even have a myth where they believe that, there's some people, Black people, in America before the slave trade. They're just delusional, but they're doing this as a defense mechanism.
They are foundationally Black Americans, and they what they're trying to do is, and it is not a myth, if you do a little more research, you'll realize that Africans actually came to America prior to Columbus. So there were Africans on the American continent before the slave trade. So there were Black people already there. And there were also slaves that came over. and met up with the indigenous Black people that were on the continent. A lot of them is kind of mixed up. Their problem is that they're grouping everyone into one group. They want to create their own, what you call like their own nation, because you know, Americans, as you know, they don't have what we have in terms of, you know, like our tribes, our culture and all that. So because of that, they developed their own kind of tribe, and they call it foundationally Black Americans. The problem with it is they are deeply rooted in stereotypical ways of thinking about Africa. They believe that Africans sold them here. And I think that's the biggest division, because we're taken away from the bigger, the grand scale of it, which was that the white people came over into our territory with ammunition and guns. And basically, yes, there were slaves being sold, but that is not the majority. We have over, 2 million slaves that came over. You can't tell me that every person sold their child and their sister and their brother and stuff like that. There are different things that came into play. But prior to that, they came with their own ammunition and took over and continued to steal and take families and separate them, which they're still doing till today. So we can't ignore that and put all these different, you know, taking the blame away from who really caused the issue. And then now, you know, cause even further division between, you know, the community of Black people. Black people are all over the world. You know, Africans have migrated everywhere. You know, it's a very ignorant thing to say that one ancestor, my ancestors in America and my ancestors in Africa are totally different. They're the same people, whether it was in the 1400s or, you know, or now till today. We still share the same blood.
I do appreciate you saying that. I do want to piggyback and continue to say that we have to understand, and the main question, as we said, and which he really answered the majority of it so well, is that did our ancestors start it? The key is no, they didn't start it. And it's in transition as the slave trade began, different aspects of the slave trade started to come about. Our ancestors started it with just, okay, I'm sending my child to be a maid to you. And they hope the child is going to come back. And then to the point, they say that 1300, 1400, that's how it started. But then by the 17 and 1800, it was more, they see force, their children being taken from them with force. You know, by 1600, it was also barter.
We weren't selling our children. There's no way that we could have started slavery. There's absolutely no way. We weren't selling. That wasn't an option for us to go to the Americas. So that is out of the question. To even question that is ignorant, because they came into a foreign land and they had to come in some way. It couldn't just, so the original startup was that we were going to go in and literally kidnap these people and use them. That's where it started. So it was mainly, and that's basically the basis of it. It was a lot of kidnapping going on. And then you got, of course, if someone puts a gun to your head, you know, you're going to make a decision to basically find other ways. And that's when we started going to other tribes. We had tribes going against other tribes. There were no huge divisions back then. We had a system that we used to, and they call it slavery, but it's not slavery. It's just the way we handled prisoners. But that is not the majority.
Can I chime in, please? I think that, in fact, when I saw this topic, I didn't want to dial in because I didn't want to dial in because it's a very, very sensitive topic.
Yes.
And when you want to, I'm somebody that I either tell the truth or I don't say anything. So I may not say something that may be palatable. Maybe it's not what people want to hear. But at the same time, I would like to say that we have to also learn to tell the truth, because the truth is out there, whether we want to accept it or not. If you go to Gorée Island, which is an island off the coast of Senegal, and you go into the slave house, which is a complex. Each country in West Africa has its slave points, and they are usually like an island where the slaves are taken at the last door to pass through to go into the ship that will bring them across to this place, to other places. They dot the whole of West Africa. In Nigeria is Badagry. If you go to Ghana, is there. If you go to any of these West African countries, they are there. So if you go to the Gorée Island, the man in charge of the curator of the place, and Americans go there in droves. I've been there maybe about 3-4 times, because whenever I go to Senegal, I like to go to Gorée Island because they keep receiving funds to be able to improve the facilities. But they say exactly the same thing. I think it's to everybody. And one of the things they say is that they are choice slaves. And the type of slaves, where they come from, and the ethnicity commands more money than maybe slaves from other ethnicity in West Africa and so on. And when you also hear them talk about how the slaves are collected, and I've had it somewhere else also, that initially, and I don't know anywhere where the slave traders from outside the continent went inland. No, the slaves were brought to the coast. They didn't go in. I didn't hear about them going in. Maybe they facilitate those who will go in to go and get the slaves for them for whatever reason or the other. But they didn't go in. We don't have any history of them going into the hinterland of Africa to go and collect the slaves for themselves. So I think we have to be very careful when although we are trying to look forward, look ahead, but at the same time, the history has been told is out there. And we have to be careful so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot by changing the dynamics that are out there and saying that people went in and so on. No, maybe going in was later with the Bible, and but that was economic slavery that came with religion and so on. To say that they said Bible in one hand and the ability to take the natural resources in the other hand and things like that. So we have to know what is out there before we pronounce ourselves to say that this is what it is. What you were talking about people being sent to family members and so on, maybe that started like that, but as time went on with the dynamics, yes, at the beginning, but as time went on, it became like, people even go to war and they capture people, and then they sell them because it's very lucrative to now sell each other as slaves, and they take them all the way to the coast and hand them over to the slave masters.
Right.
And even there are people in history in Nigeria that your wealth was measured even amongst the Yorubas, that other tribes, their wealth were measured by the number of slaves that they command and that they have, because it means that they will now be able to sell them. It's like commodities. It's like they have cocoa and they are ready to sell them to. So we need to be able to tell the truth about our past, but we should not dwell on them.
Right.
But we
So
should not try to
just
change
want to
the
get it
truth.
clear. And sorry, I just want to understand exactly what you're saying, just for clarification. So you're saying that because you're saying that obviously different tribes would fight against each other, and then when they conquer a certain tribe, they will then bring them to the slave masters to kind of take overseas. But which one came first? How do they even know that how do they even know that there's white people waiting on the coastline
Thank you.
for us to sell these people to?
That's what I'm saying.
So white people did come with guns. We didn't have guns.
Here's how it happened,
they
guys.
if they came with guns, they did not. I'm saying, we Black people, we believe we didn't have written tradition. It's oral tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And I even did some research during my first degree to explore this oral tradition type of thing. We didn't have written tradition. Written tradition came later. And you have to now try to decipher and from what is passed down from generation to generation. And I'm saying that in all, I may be wrong, maybe I'm not as knowledgeable as I should be, that I have not come across where they say that the white people came into, I'm talking about at the beginning, maybe later they did, I don't know, that they were the ones that went in to go and get these slaves. The slaves were taken to the coast. That's all that I know. Maybe I'm not knowledgeable enough.
No, it's not that. What you're saying is true to how it happened, but not exactly that way, because what actually took place is that the slave master met with the chief. That's how he was inside the mainland, and organized with the chief, because everybody in Africa respects their chief. If the chief say go get this, you go get that. So
they could have supplied them with the guns and all that.
That's
to
right.
be able to go and fight their wars, because our people were even exchanging. If you go to the Badagry slave post, they will tell you, because I was there 2 years ago, they will tell you, they will even show you what slaves were being exchanged for: mirrors, guns, some other stupid, what we will consider as stupid things nowadays, umbrella.
But they didn't know. It was strange new thing. I don't know if you ever watched the Gods Must Be Crazy.
That's what we are saying. To say that our people, because we were always fighting and conquering each other and expanding our empire and things like that, we were having slaves that were coming to work in the farms, like the king or the local chief in those days. All those working there were not just people from his family. They were not just people from the clan. They were slaves captured from the war of expansion and so on. That's what I'm saying, that we used to have things like that. Every culture, and that was why I was talking about Israel, and I'm talking about before Christ. Right. Everywhere you mention it, there's always been attempts to expand our your borders. That has always been there, and the wanting to subjugate others. Even when you are talking about the British Empire and so on, it's the same principle. Trying to subjugate others to make yourself better. Because I was reading the other time about the wealth of the British ruling class. The wealth is just unimaginable, and it's not as if they mine gold or diamond in Britain. It's from whatever they collect from other places, and then they call themselves great.
Exactly, but it's not. We know the truth.
Britain is just a small island. So what I'm trying to say is that, which is the reason why I was saying, debating whether to come in or not to come in, because I don't want to say things that may not be popular, but I would always say what I know as the truth.
That's true. That's true. Thank you so much for sharing that. I do appreciate that perspective. What we're here for is to gain a lot of perspective. Calvin, what is your perspective to all that we are digesting here?
From what I understand is that when we talk about ancestors, we're talking about the ancestors from long ago, and I think it's very important for all of us to remember that if we meet a person of another race or whatever, the descendants, they're not accountable for, in my opinion, this is my opinion, they're not accountable for the actions of their ancestors. However, they are beneficiaries of a lot of what was done in the past. And I believe that it's very important that we make that distinction that the African race, the Caucasian race, Asian or whatever, that today in 2023, that we are accountable for our own actions. You know, like to give you a good example, what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. And before this point, they got along well. And we could go on different people throughout the world. And so we should just make that clear. However, the one thing that's our responsibility is we have to get our cultural memory back. We're suffering from cultural amnesia, and I believe that we need to bring it to the point where we gather the history. That's why I like this conversation, because I'm learning things.
Ms. Amara, do you have any comment to what our sister Yatunde Teraba was saying earlier?
No, I'm actually in agreement with we're not responsible for, you know, what our ancestors have done, but we are beneficiaries of it. I think that this discussion needs to be had because there's a lot of obviously controversy surrounding it, and I think that there's a deep wound amongst Black Americans and Africans, and that's what's causing the separation to stay in place. There's stereotypes on both groups, stereotypes about Black Americans, and there's stereotypes about Africans. And what we need to realize is that those stereotypes are in place for a reason, to continue to divide us. A lot of times, like I've been subjected to two cultures, my Nigerian, you know, culture and the American one. And a lot of times I've heard both sides where Africans were treated horribly. I've been called an African booty scratcher growing up in school. I've been talked down on because I'm African. So I've felt it firsthand. My mother has experienced it in the school system, just discrimination because of her accent. I've even seen it with some of my peers that I went to school with, some Ethiopians that I went to school with who have an accent. They were discriminated against. They weren't treated fairly. And then at the same time, I was told from Black Americans that Africans look down on them. They treat them like they're kind of not at their level, you know? So it's a huge division there that we have to get to the source and bottom of it before we can move forward. I think that there is a movement, like with the wave of DNA testing, to try and find out where exactly you're coming from. So there's a push in that direction, but we still have a lot to
long way to go.
Yeah.
I want to also welcome one of the wonderful guests, and I'm sure she has a lot to share here.
Hello, everyone. Great topic. I'm just listening and trying to catch up.
You know, and again, one thing I want to make sure I mention, just like we're talking about the main one from Igbo, where we came from, every part of Africa has their own section of how the slave trade impacted them. But all Africa practiced the same because we were one before. We were one. So when the slave master came, it impacted us in so many different ways. depending on what section. Like if you go to Benin, it was so strongly hit over there. But the most people that resisted them so much are the Biafrans, which are the Igbos. So if anyone ever is in Washington, D.C., please go to the African Museum, the new one. And you will definitely get a whole lot of that history. It will show you it started from Biafra land. So history is really, we need to make sure we know ourselves. And that's why I want to make sure I end it good. So the topics we have, or the parts that we have, part 2 next week says, do Africans really think they are better than African Americans, Blacks? I know this topic hits all the time, right neck to the one we are discussing with. So when are we going to ever, I mean, here it is 2023, we're still talking about this topic. That means we haven't learned, we haven't become. Why should I feel inferior being around my own Black person? Because this is full of inferiority complex and low self-esteem. But there's an answer to that. Which is why we hold the meeting today. That answer stems from what we are discussing today.
I want to interject. Did you see the questions that I posed?
Okay, let me see. Thank you so much for that. He said, why is there this beef between African Americans and Africans when other races see us as Black people? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah. The beef is there because of misunderstanding between one another, just like we all shared here. You know, the beef is there, which is why I hold this meeting today. And every year, it's because this was demanded. We did something like this 2 years ago, 2021, and it was brought by so much demand and so much that's going on today that we're like, you know what, we might have to start talking like this every February until we can get some, you know, some sense out of it and make sure we are united, because that's the key. So in your question, excuse me, the beef is there because of the, if I may use the word, ignorance of why we are fighting against each other. Some people are saying what we're just discussing today. My ancestors sold us, so I'm not going back to Africa. When you need Africa, and my sister Yatunde said it so beautifully, as it's quoted in the Bible, a house that is divided cannot what? Stand. We are not going anywhere if we can never unite. And they're making sure of it every day. The more divided we can become, the better we can be conquered. So which one of you, I mean, to yesteryears, it was slavery. Who knows what's next? But thank God we know better.
Just to add one line to our brother's question, is to say that, you know, is divide and rule. If we are together and we all see ourselves as one, then we become a very strong force, because there's nowhere that in the whole world where you don't have Black people. So if we are now being told that, oh, you African Americans are different, or you are better, or you are disadvantaged because of your brother or sister and so on, we'll be divided among ourselves. So people are able to divide us when they emphasize what is different among us instead of talking about what unites us. Because if we are united, and it doesn't mean that it's the other race that is doing that. They can use us again. We can use ourselves against ourselves. Because if we get it into our head that this is what it is, only a few people need to throw around negative thoughts that all these people are coming to take your jobs. These people they are not here to fight the or what we are benefiting from now. Now they are just coming and so on. If people throw that into our heads, and rational human beings,
that's week 3, by the way.
Okay,
They're coming
that's
to
what
take
we
all our
just be
jobs.
thinking about. So I think it's the divide and rule. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. It is divide and rule, but how do you get to be divided and rule is because of out of ignorance. That's why our forefathers like Frederick Douglass and Kwame Nkrumah, back then they were united. They knew about the importance. MLK, all of them knew about the importance of re-education of the Negro, but I call it re-education of the Africans. The more all of us can be re-educated, the better. Okay, but yeah, week 3 says, do all Africans, African Americans, Blacks know true history? And week 3, that's week 3. Week 2 next week is, do Africans really think they are better than African Americans, taking job opportunities meant for African Americans, Black? Hello, when are we waking up? Who are the ones working nowadays that are taking the jobs? You don't have to worry about your Black Africans, but there's another race out there that's already taking it, and you're busy fighting each other. And they coming strong. Okay? So you don't have to worry about that. The key, like my sister said, how can we unite? And that's what we ended with 4. We're saying, how do we heal to maintain the covenant? Focusing rather on what unites us rather than what divides us. Very fundamental. None of us knew that we have a covenant with God, which is the main real thing I wanted to make sure we share today. We had a covenant with God. And that was what we were holding on to. That was why anyone back then, if you disobeyed, then you're being out of line with God. And you have to be, or you go worship an idol worshiper, then you're definitely out of line. You are considered a losu. That's how all that started developing. Till this day, out of in Igbo land, I know for sure, even when I got married, the first thing my family back home was, or even here in America, let's go find out. And literally, people were sent. I'm a living witness. People were sent to go make sure my husband's family are not Osu. Very important. And vice versa. His family was researching, investigating. None of them knew until everything came out. They said, okay, after they research, because you do it in secret, then they tell you. Very important. If you call yourself a child of God, forget about who's saying Christian, but a true child of God connects spiritually. That's the covenant. And if you don't have that, you don't have anything else. That's why we're allowing ourselves to be taught by somebody else, to be told who we are. Do we know who we are? It says, do African Americans really know their true history? Do you know who you are? So it's very important. So I'm gonna go ahead and start closing us unless anyone have another comment. Thank you so much for so many of you who joined us. As a rule or as a really housekeeping for the show, the way we do, we start with prayer and we discuss the issues, and then we end with prayer, making sure everything is covered, that we covered here is presented back to God. Again, due to the fact that we believe to be a people of God, everything we do, we share with God, spiritually and verbally and otherwise. So that's the whole root of it. And we want to bring that back to the society, to our communities these days, to know in bringing that back, it helps to heal. It helps to also create that covenant. And that's very important in African community. Let's present ourselves back to the Lord, thanking him. Gracious Father, thank you so very much for today. There's a lot we have learned and shared. And I pray that the heart receive it very well, but not only that, be able to share and be a blessing to someone else out there, a sister, a brother, or someone from a different race. It's hard like this. Imagine what it is for other race. They don't even understand us. But one day we believe that all of this, because after all the division, we'll come to realize that we came from one race, which is from Africa. We are so grateful to you. We thank thee, Father Almighty. If all the division and conquering, which you allow, and I understand it, being spiritually with you, I understand the purpose. The as much bad as it may sound, we wouldn't have really, the evolution would not have all progressed to this day had it just all stayed in Africa. I understand. And as after all is said and done, we have to also know that whatever you allow it may not make sense to us. It's meant for good. It's for your own glory and for our growth right here on earth. So I thank thee, as hard as it is, because think of it. Where will US be without your brother, your kids from Africa? Where would Caribbean, where would any nation be without Africans? So we do understand. We just want to say it's painful to think that we have to go through that for the expansion, for the expanse of the universe. But we thank you. We thank you. We know that you're proving that you're allowing all these things for your glory, for our growth. We thank thee, Father. Take glory. May you be blessed. And after all is said and done, may indeed every nation come to bow to you. You are so magnificent. We thank you, Father, for this day. In the glorious name of your Lord Jesus. Amen.